Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be comparing two military ships that have been purpose-built to be able to shred other large vessels. They may have the same goal, but they go about doing their thing in very different ways. And I know that they already dubbed the Perseus as being a sub-capital class killer, which is just a fancy roundabout way of saying large ships, which does include other fleet ships like the Polaris, the Nautilus, and the Hammerhead. But I'll show that it's going to be just as viable of an option to use in combat for destroying both large and medium-sized cap ships, just like the Polaris was originally designed to take out. There's going to be three main differences between these vessels that I'll be focusing on. First, I'll take a look at what their list of components are, then I'll compare their weapons loadouts. After that, I'll take a look at the difference in their size and how that affects these vessels, and then I'll finish off by talking about why someone would want one of these ships over the other. So let's start out by talking about components. Now, I'm not planning on going over every one of the components that these ships have. Instead, I'm just going to focus on how they differ from one another. And if these ships remain true to what they're described as having for a components loadout, then the Polaris is going to have several advantages over the Perseus. First among them is going to be with the Perseus's radar. The Perseus has a medium-sized radar, while the Polaris jumps way ahead of it, having one that's capital class sized. Also, the Perseus has two large power plants, while the Polaris has a single capital class sized power plant. The Polaris also has 3 fuel intakes as opposed to the Perseus's 2. While the Perseus does manage to pull off a win in the fuel tank department, having 2 large tanks, while the Polaris only has 2 that are medium-sized. The bottom line is that the Polaris is going to be a lot better at detecting and hunting down targets, and at keeping its ship fully powered and operational. But it's going to have a shorter range than the Perseus, and is going to be more dependent on other vessels to take care of its refueling needs. There's been some discrepancy between the information that's listed on the Matrix, the ship page, and the brochure about the Polaris's weapons loadout. So here's the final word from the Polaris's designer himself as to what kinds of armaments that the ship has. It's got 4 launchers that fire size 10 torpedoes. This means that it's going to be able to hold up to 4 lock-ons at once and be able to fire 4 of its 10 size torpedoes simultaneously. It has 5 manned turrets that have 2 size 4 weapons on them, 1 remote turret that's armed with 2 size 5 weapons, 1 automated turret that's armed with 2 size 4 weapons, and 2 anti-fighter missile racks, each of which are going to carry 16 size 3 missiles. The Perseus has 2 manually operated turrets that each holds a pair of size 7 guns. One is located along the bow of the ship, and the other is set on the underside and more towards the rear of the vessel. The ship's bridge creates a blind spot for the top turret, so the only way that you wouldn't be able to bring both of the turrets to bear on a single target would be if it was attacking the ship from behind. It has 2 more turrets that are located on the top and bottom of the ship, which are armed with 2 size 3 ballistic Gatling guns. They're designed to take out fighter craft and for shooting down incoming missiles. Both of these turrets will come equipped with blades, so they can be automated by default or they can be manually operated from the bridge. It also has a complement of 20 size 5 torpedoes, which is the smallest size that a self-propelled projectile can be and still be considered as a torpedo. The only issue I see with this is that in order to lock onto an enemy, you have to keep the fighter within the pilot's sights long enough for the targeting computer to get a lock on and then be able to shoot it. And if we've learned anything from the Connie, it's that a smaller fighter can easily stay out of a larger, slower ship's line of fire. So unless turret operators are given the ability to target lock for missiles, then I see the Perseus's ordnance loadout as not being very effective of a way to take out fighter craft. And it would have been a better idea to do what the Polaris did and use a pair of missile turrets for this purpose. They've already stated that the Achilles heel of this ship will be if it gets swarmed by light fighters, and every vessel is intended to have some kind of weakness. So this was most likely an intentional move that was done to make the Perseus a better companion craft to something that was built to be an anti-fighter and torpedo screen like the Hammerhead is. Next I'm going to talk about size. The Polaris is a lot bigger ship than the Perseus, but bigger size means more mass, and more mass means more stress on the engines, greater drain on the power plant, slower speeds, less maneuverability, and it's going to consume fuel at a higher rate. And the Polaris is going to get even bigger when it goes into the white box phase of development. Within the ship's schematics, the Polaris is shown to have escape pods, a flight deck, cargo bay, hangar, an engineering section, crew quarters, and a mess hall. But what it doesn't show is that it's also confirmed to have an armory, a brig, a captain's quarters, a secondary room for housing the fighter pilot, and yes, a medical bay. And in order to accommodate for these additional rooms, the ship is going to have to be increased in size, but how much and to what extent is still being determined. The cargo deck can hold 216 SCUs of cargo, and as I stated before, the ship is already going to increase in size, so it stands to reason that this number might end up going up as well. While the Perseus's smaller size means that, in comparison to the Polaris, it should be a lot more fuel efficient. It'll be able to maintain a higher level of maneuverability even though it's heavily armored, and you won't have to worry about prioritizing its energy needs between the engine's weapons and its defensive systems. The Perseus doesn't hold nearly as much cargo as the Polaris, but is big enough to carry 50 SCUs of cargo, or some extra goodies like components, supplies, or a vehicle that's basically rover-sized. The bottom line here is that having a larger ship means having more specialized rooms and space for cargo, but it's also going to be a lot heavier of a drain on your internal resources. The Polaris is going to have more of everything, but the Perseus is going to be a lot more efficient at what it does. So why would you want to have a Polaris rather than the Perseus? The two main things I'm going to focus in on when it comes to why a player would prefer this ship are tactics and crew size. The Polaris was originally described as being a nimble corvette-class capital vessel that was designed to take on larger craft and small to medium-sized cap ships. It's intended to get in quick, deliver its payload, and then GTFO as soon as possible. The turrets are there to fend off any smaller fighter craft that attempts to intercept it and to shoot down any incoming missiles. It's intended to act as the flagship for military operations, performing search and rescue missions, and doing general security patrols. It also has facilities that are capable of repairing, rearming, and refueling a single fighter, light bomber, or support vessel. The torpedoes are going to be able to practically one-shot a large ship and inflict significant amounts of damage against a cap ship, enough at least to take down one or two of its shield generators, which would allow the rest of the fleet to finish it off. The Polaris is meant to be faster than the other large capital class ships and tougher than the smaller ones, but how much so will be determined over time and through the course of game balancing. The main offensive power of the Polaris comes from its allotment of 28 size 10 torpedoes, so tactically speaking, this ship would go in first and launch as many of its torpedoes as it could before it's forced to retreat back to a safe location. It's lightly armored and it isn't going to be able to stand up to a constant barrage of fire. It's fast and nimble for its size, and that's what it's going to have to use to stay alive. Its radar has a long range, so it'll be able to identify, target enemies, and fire its missiles from a safe distance away. But torpedoes are slow, and if you fire them from that far away, they'll be easy to shoot down, so you're going to want to get in as close as possible before you begin your bombing run. Landing a hit with a torpedo is going to end up being a matter of overwhelming your target's defenses with saturation fire in the hopes that just one of them slips through the enemy's defenses and ends up scoring a clean hit. And that's what's going to be a lot of the gameplay that's associated with the Polaris. It's going to be doing choreographed strikes with other torpedo ships against a specific vessel. Then they'll break away and regroup while the fleet spotter sets them up to attack again or to go after another target. A Polaris can be used to thin out the number of gunships, hammerheads, or missile boats that an attacking fleet has, or it could be part of a coordinated strike against larger targets like a frigate or even a destroyer-class cap ship, where it'll use its size 10 missiles to soften them up to the point where the rest of the fleet can finish them off. This kind of hit-and-run type of gameplay could be a huge adrenaline rush for players, especially when it's being done as part of a massive fleet battle. I see this coordinated effort that exists between the crew, the captain, and the fleet command as being a lot more of a social experience for a player to indulge in, which could be a huge plus or minus depending on whether or not you like that kind of thing. When it comes to other uses, the Polaris is first and foremost a military ship, so its design was based mainly around combat scenarios. Its ideal role is to act as a patrol ship for search and rescue operations or as the lead for a capital class fleet, but it can have other uses as well. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that this ship wasn't intended to be used to make money. Warships in general are going to be incredibly expensive to maintain and operate, and the Polaris is going to be no exception to this. That doesn't mean that you can't make money with it, it just means that you're going to have to be a bit more creative in how you go about doing it. So why would you want a Perseus over the Polaris? After all, I just described the Polaris as having an impressive torpedo loadout, it's caked with anti-aircraft turrets, and it's equipped with every kind of onboard facility that a person could need. So what exactly does this gunship have over a Corsair? Two things really. And they're going to be the same two things that I focused on when talking about the Polaris, and that's tactics and crew size. The Polaris is going to require a sizable crew in order just to run all of its turrets, and that doesn't include the pilot, captain, the extra fighter pilot, co-pilot, additional bridge crew, and any of the engineering staff. Not a lot of people are going to have that number of resources to fall back on even if they are part of a large org, so chances are that you're going to have to rely heavily on an NPC crew and blades to fill in those gaps. NPCs are going to be expensive, and blades apparently are going to be mediocre in the skill department. Well, the 6 crewmen on the Perseus are going to be the pilot, captain, 2 gunners, and then there's going to be 2 additional roles that are meant to be a bit more flexible in nature. But including the pilot, the Perseus is going to be fully functional with just 2 additional people. The anti-missile turrets can, by default, be automated, which just leaves the 2 main turrets open, and you might be able to slave one or both of them to the pilot's control using a blade. So ideally, you might be able to get by with just 1 additional crewman to help you run things. So this is definitely going to be the ship of choice with people who want to run with a smaller crew, but still want to get the most out of their gameplay experience when it comes to fleet warfare. The other appealing thing about the Perseus is the type of gameplay that it offers. The Perseus fits a hybrid role that sits somewhere between the Hammerhead and the Polaris and is intended to act as a fleet defense ship. Well, the tactics that are involved with using it are going to be a lot less complicated than they are with the Polaris, which could be a huge plus for people who'd rather face an enemy head-on and slug it out. A Perseus's captain is going to be tasked with holding a position and laying down a barrage of fire as soon as the enemy is within range, and to keep at it until either they run out of bullets or enemies to turn into scrap. And as far as taking on other capital class ships goes, this is all I have to say about the matter. A size 7 gun is something that's supposed to be capable of penetrating capital class shielding, heavy armor, and goes well above what the minimum damage threshold levels for a cap-sized ship are going to be. And the Perseus brings 4 size 7 guns into a battle while using a fraction of the manpower that an equivalent amount of Ions or Infernos would need. Plus the Perseus has better defenses, a longer range, and an anti-missile point defense system. So it's going to be a very effective tool to use against medium to large size cap ships, and I know full well that it's not going to single-handedly take on a Javelin or an Idris, but it's going to be able to add a significant amount of DPS to any attacking or defending fleet. If its smaller size can keep its overhead costs down, then the Perseus could also be a great escort vessel to use for a caravan of mercantile ships. It's a large vessel, so it should be able to keep up with them, and I think just the sight of a gunship like this would be enough to make even a big group of pirates think twice before attacking. Swarms of ships may be its weak spot, but I'm pretty sure that the point defense system could take on a few interceptors, and the big guns could definitely take out any medium to large size threats. So the bottom line is that both of these ships are going to be a necessary addition to anyone's personal fleet, but the main question comes down to which one of their gameplay mechanics seems more appealing to you, and how many people you're going to have to reliably call upon to crew your ship. So if you can answer those two things, then you have your answer as to which ship is going to be better for you. The Polaris is going to be a lot more of a social experience, both in how you deal with your crew and how you collaborate your actions with the command staff who are going to be orchestrating the fleet battle. While the Perseus is going to provide a similar and very exciting experience for the captain, but they're going to have a much more manageable sized crew to work with, and their responsibilities within the fleet are going to be a lot more straightforward. That's going to be it for this episode of Versus. I'd like to thank everyone for liking and subscribing because it increases my visibility on YouTube and it really helps the channel to grow. I'd also like to give a huge thanks to my patrons for sticking with me, especially considering the circumstances that everyone's dealing with right now. If you'd like to become a supporter, you can find a link to my Patreon channel in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and take care.